Chris Pomey here, radio host of Live with CDP on CKRT Border City Radio in Windsor. I'm here at the KeyBank Center tonight for tonight's matchup between the 11-2 Toronto Rock and the 6-6 Buffalo Bandits. And I have a special guest with me. He is the color analyst for the Buffalo Bandits on 1520 The Bet, Steve Bermo. And I'm going to bring him on right now and get Steve's thoughts on the Bandits last week's game against Saskatchewan. Steve, thoughts on last week's 15-14 exciting overtime win over Saskatchewan?
Hey Chris, I think it was a record breaker. I believe we had 14 ties in a game that was ends up going to overtime, but no team scored more than 2 goals in a run, and no team ever had a 2-goal lead, so it's about as close a game as you could have. Some people saying it may have been one of the best games in NLL history. I don't know about all that for a regular season game between Saskatchewan and Buffalo, but it certainly was a heck of a game, and as back and forth as it could go. And it was super entertaining. I think for Saskatchewan, they're super disappointed by the result. For Buffalo, I think they might have expected maybe to win going away, but a win for this Buffalo team was important no matter how it came last week.
What are your thoughts on the Buffalo Bandits' new acquisitions, Connor Farrell, and then this week Paul Dawson, a defenseman? Just quick thoughts on both of them and how much they can help this team going forward towards the playoffs.
Yeah, Connor had a good week last week, something like 27 for 32 at the dot, but he's got his work cut out for him tonight against TD Erlin. But there is some history between them in the field game. They have played PLL games against each other, and they've had some battles at the dot, so we'll see what happens tonight. Connor Farrell definitely going to have a not as easy a time against TD Erlin as he did last week against Saskatchewan. And Paul Dawson, a 38-year-old veteran, kind of exactly what you would expect. Some people who were asking me about the deal, I said, think Zdeno Chara, right? Maybe in his twilight at the end of his career. Still a big guy, still plays with the mean streak, still definitely has a lot in the tank, but 38 years old. That said, the Bandits can use veteran leadership out the back door. Justin Martin goes to IR, Frank Brown goes to IR, so an addition of a player like Paul Dawson is huge for this defensive back end that is young and depleted by injuries.
What are your thoughts on the return of Matt Vince?
Oh, I mean, he's one of the best to do it. I thought last week, he even told me he wanted a couple back, but I will tell you, late in the fourth quarter and overtime, he defined slamming the door. He did exactly what he does in clutch moments. He had so many great saves down the stretch, including 3 or 4 in overtime on some point-blank looks that let Buffalo win. So, not his best game, he would tell you that, but an unbelievable steadying presence back there, especially when the game was on the line.
What are your thoughts on tonight's opponent, the Toronto Rock, and what are some keys to a Bandit win tonight?
Well, arguably and statistically, the Rock best team in the league, but for some reason, the Bandits have had their number, right? Going back to the last regular season meeting last year, the 2 playoff games last year, and when Buffalo went up to Hamilton this year, they handled them pretty readily. A late push from Toronto made the score closer than it was, but for some reason, Buffalo has had Toronto's number. I do think that Toronto, of course, has a chance to win. They're such a great team and so dynamic, but there's just something there about the Bandits against Toronto that they seem to have their number, or whatever cliche you want to use. So for them, they used a big run against Toronto in the second quarter and the third quarter to beat them. They built a huge lead, and then Toronto's late surge wasn't enough to get them over the hump. Buffalo, I don't know if they want to go blow for blow with Toronto like they did with Saskatchewan last week. I think that they need to go on a big run if they're going to beat this Rock team.
Who's the X factor for the Buffalo Bandits tonight, and maybe possibly the Toronto Rock in this game?
X factors, I think Chase Fraser for Buffalo. He's second on the team in goal scoring, but had a little bit of a quiet week last week, so he's going to have to chip in with some secondary scoring. And I think for Toronto, same thing. Corey Small, I don't think he scored last week, but he's a great goal scorer. He knows this building well. He knows the Bandits well, having played for him, and he's such a dynamic goal scorer. So for me, give me Corey Small on the Rock side, and give me Chase Fraser on the Buffalo side.
What kind of a game are you expecting here tonight, and what time is your broadcast on with John on the Bet 1520 AM here in Buffalo?
Yeah. Pre-game starts at 6:30 live, 15:20 a.m. The Bet. Face-off at 7 o'clock today, not 7:30 like a lot of games. And what was the question? The other question was about what was your other question for the game?
The other question for the day: what kind of game are you expecting? What kind of game are you expecting tonight?
Always a physical game, right? There's guys on these teams that don't like each other, that beat the heck out of each other, in part because they've played against each other for so long. Nick Weiss, Mitch Desnew. I expect a physical game. I would not be surprised to see a fight or two tonight either, especially the way that first game went up in Hamilton. The Rock won't admit it. It feels like a revenge game for them, so we'll see what kind of game plays out, but always a physical matchup between these two teams.
And finally, Steve, where can my audience follow you on social media?
Yeah, the best way on X, Twitter, at Steve Bermel, SteveBermel. That's where you can find most of my Bandits content as well as other sports musings. So thanks, Chris.
Thanks a lot, Steve, and have a great broadcast.